Hey guys, Ratha here. I know I've been kind of quiet and not uploading the past few days since the new update launched, but that's just because I've been totally addicted playing every day on my Twitch stream, and instead of making videos, I've just been enjoying the new league. But yesterday, I finally managed to unlock my fourth ascendancy with some friends. We did the fourth ascendancy trial of the Sekimas together, and I got my fourth ascendancy slot, so I'm now stacking max res, which is nice. Um, and I figured that, and we also made it to T15 maps and killed the Arbiter of Ash. So I figured this would be a good time to update you guys about the build because it has been quite the interesting journey I've been on with this build. I'm level 86 currently, and you'll probably notice a few things are very, very different with what I posted on my build video versus what I currently have equipped, and that's because I'm trying out some new things that I have been curious about that they announced in the trailers and whatnot. So I've been testing those things out instead of going for a one-to-one exact replica of my build video that I posted. But one thing to note before I go into that is that the build video that I posted had a weapon that is probably no longer acquirable in the game, which isn't necessarily a huge problem. It's just your damage isn't going to be as good as it was in that video. But with my current set, I'm still sitting around like 200,000 total DPS, which is pretty nice, according to Path of Building here. Show you. Oh, I was testing out some stuff. Ignore all this. I was testing some stuff. But according to POB, with just this setup, I'm still sitting at around like 200,000 full DPS with our Tempest spells carrying us most of the way and Rolling Assault's only doing about 20,000 damage. But since we're combining so many things that do damage, whenever everything is up, it's actually doing quite a lot of damage, which is nice. Also, is it calculating banner placing? Yeah, it is. Okay, good. All right, so just that I would just want to note that the staff, the quarter staff in the guide is probably no longer buildable because they changed how crafting works. I got that quarter staff but from someone who probably used like two or three different perfect essences to get the +5 to skills, plus the onslaught, plus the extra physical damage. Now with the new crafting system, you can only have one crafted modifier on an item, which means that you can desecrate one of the modifiers and you can craft one of them with an essence. You can't craft another essence onto a thing. So let's say you use a greater essence in order of abrasion in order to add flat fizz. Well, now you can't use a perfect essence on it later in the craft to remove a modifier and augment with a new one. So you have to decide whether or not you want to either use a greater essence to guarantee a mod before you start getting other modifiers on the items. So when you upgrade it from magic to rare, can force like a flat fizz or something on, or if later you want to add like +3 to attacks or onslaught or whatever you want to add. You have to decide which one you want to do now, which is kind of annoying. It makes it a lot harder to craft things, and that's why weapons are extremely rare and expensive right now, especially the really good ones. So I just wanted to preface this with that. That being said, let's look into a few things that I have changed with the build so far. So you'll notice the belt I'm using is Rislatha's Coil. I was mostly using this because I had another staff, which I think I still have it being sold. It was worth quite a bit. Now it's not anymore because, it's been a few days. But I was using this, and I had the rune for rolling only the minimum or maximum damage value for physical damage. But what Rislatha's Coil does is it increases or gives you more maximum physical damage by like 40%, and then less minimum physical damage by 30. Those are at the maximum values. So the reason I wanted that is because we can increase the amount of physical maximum hit we do and lower the at the cost of lowering the minimum. So it could either roll. I think when I have both of these on, what does it say? My Whirling Assault's max hit is like 3,000 fizz or 600 fizz. So we're basically gambling with either really low damage or extremely high damage instead of just having like an even amount of both. Um, So I was just messing around with that a bit just to see if it would be like really good damage. I think it could be, but you
Seems like a good deal.
definitely have to build around it a bit more than what I'm doing. All right, and you'll notice I did get the surrounded helmet, which is awesome. I was trying to do a version of the build without surrounded nodes, but I noticed that the damage and recovery was just like not great, because you'd have to get like recovery like this somewhere else, as well as the attack speed. Especially since they nerfed the attack speed on the quality of Whirling Assault now, we had to get attack speed somewhere else, and this is the best way to do it. So I did say this is optional, and it still kind of is, but I would say with the changes they made, it might be mandatory now just to get enough damage. But let me know if you guys have found a better solution. That being said, if you are using not this helmet, if you are not using that helmet, you could use this. It's called Perfect Opportunity. Damage with hits is lucky against heavy stun enemies. Normally, we use a support skill called Defy, which gives us that lucky damage with hits, which basically just rolls your damage option or your damage twice to take the better outcome. Almost like a crit. It's not exactly a crit, but it's basically like, let's say like we hit like in the middle of our damage range. Well, now it'll roll it again, so we might be able to hit the maximum damage value instead. So if you don't have the Shrine Helmet, take this, and you'll just get that lucky damage against when they're heavy stunned, which we do very easily with this build. All right. And then the other things I wanted to show you guys is I was testing Frostflame Nova. I was really trying to make it work, and I ran into a few issues with it. Uh, Basically, the TLDR is Frostflame Nova will not work off only massive ignites. It has to have some kind of added cold damage, increased cold damage, some cold spell damage or something, or a lot of increased freeze buildup in order to actually get the instant freezes on enemies. I was testing it out, and I was only freezing enemies with like a max 100% flammability ignite. I was only freezing them for about like 0 to 5% of their threshold. And part of that might be because you need to have ignites that do their damage way faster. And unfortunately, there's not that many sources of faster ignite in the game. The only ones that we have were this one, which is 18, and then there's another one up here for 15. And I plugged it into Path of Building, and it, even with all the sources of like faster ignite and stuff, I was still only getting like maybe half of their ailment threshold as an ignite. And since crit is pretty much impossible to build on this side of the tree, it's nearly impossible to get those max crit ignites as well, which would actually increase it by quite a bit. But basically, I plugged it into Path of Building a while ago, and I inputted 1000% increased freeze buildup, and then I had to manually go in and I had to manually go in to here, put in Frostflame Nova. This is what I had to do. And you'll notice that it says Frostflame Nova, the 10% more freeze buildup for each 1% of ailment threshold dealt by the affected knight per second is not supported in PoB yet. So that means we have to calculate it ourselves. But if we just go to calculations over here, this is a little confusing for people who are new, I know. So just don't worry about it too much. Actually, let's go to our combust because that's what's doing the most ignite right now. Um, you notice it says enemy ailment threshold is 54,000. So you have to do an ignite that does like 100% of that. So like a 54,000 damage ignite. Um, and then proc Frost Flame on top of that. Um, the issue is that some of our attacks aren't procking a large enough ignite, and only certain ones are. Like combust would proc a pretty high ignite, and so would our ancestral cry stuff. These proc pretty nice ignites. So you'll see down here, this is doing like a 52% ignite with like 7,000 damage, and damage of all ignites is hitting 32,000. But the way for Frostflame to work is it needs to it does more freeze threshold based on the percentage of their ailment threshold you've done. So we're doing basically half of their ailment threshold. You would think that that would be 50% freeze then, right? Well, apparently not, because if we look at Frostflame Nova, it's showing it doesn't even, I don't think it even shows a freeze. Oh wait, here we go. Volatile ice. Where's the freeze modifier at? Freeze buildup 0 with a 54,000 uh threshold, even though we have the ignites. And part of this could be due to oh, also I didn't calculate, I guess, but let's say we're doing like 50% and we have 50% freeze threshold buildup, right? Um, so plus 50%, it would be more 50% more freeze buildup based off the thing, right? We've done half of their ailment threshold, 50% more freeze buildup. Okay, that's working, that's functioning. And even with that 50% more, it's still 0. Still 0. So that's assuming that we have half of their ailment threshold being ignited, and we're applying frost flame volatile ice to it, right? Now, if we, this is on a pinnacle boss, let's turn this down to no. So it's no longer pinnacle boss. They have less resistances and stuff. Now it's saying that it's 0.6 freeze buildup. So that's still not enough to freeze the enemy instantly. And in fact, somehow their ailment threshold has actually gone up. But another thing to note is that I'm using a amulet that is giving enemies in your presence have minus 25% fire res, and I don't think it calculates that correctly for some reason. There's no like, is the enemy in your presence calculation here. So what we could do is just do minus 25 here. That'll give us a better idea of what they're, I mean, even still, it's 0.6 still. So that alone isn't going to help. But let's just say that we've done the entirety of their ailment threshold, right? So Frostflame Nova says 10% more freeze up build up for 1% of the enemy's ailment threshold. So let's say it's 100% of the enemy's ailment threshold. That's times 10. That'd be like what, 1,000? Maybe that's where I went wrong. I did 50 instead of 500. I should have done 500. Okay, that's the 2% freeze. Now let's increase that to 1,000, just to say that we have hit that ailment threshold with an ignite, which we don't. We've only done half, but even still, with that much, with 1,000% more freeze buildup, it's still 4.5%. And I think part of this is because even though it doesn't seem like the skill needs damage to do the freeze, it does have a small amount of added cold, and I think because freeze typically needs some cold damage source in order to apply its damage, right? In order to apply its ailment, right? It's freeze, especially with chill as well. You need some source of cold damage. So the way I initially read this skill was that we would just be able to freeze them based off the ignite. But it seems like you will still need some source of cold damage. So now let's say we increase the cold damage by like 500% increased cold damage. See what happens to that now. Okay, so now we're actually getting somewhere, right? Now we're at 10%. Now let's say we have 200% increased freeze buildup to compound on the more freeze buildup that we have. So you have 1,000% more, which is a multiplier, 200% increase, which is additive, and then 500 increased cold damage, which is also additive. Oh. And now we're at 32%. You see how difficult it is to actually get this to work? And I believe part of this is just because I don't really know if they tested this for like non like pure ignite skills like well actually I don't really know because in the trailer they show flame breath which will do only ignites. That's only an ignite skill, right? And then incinerate would be similar. It does ignite damage instead of like hit damage. So you'll always have like a huge ignite on them. But they didn't like really talk about like needing cold damage for it to function. But even if I add like plus 500 cold damage to spells, think that works right. Oh wait, is it just spell cold damage? Spell cold damage. I believe that doesn't even really do anything to it, which is weird. Maybe it does. Does it? Wait, get rid of this. No, see, it doesn't go up. Only the increased cold damage seems to work for some reason. Yeah, that doesn't even help. So in order to get the freeze to work, even off of a massive ignite, you're gonna need like a disgusting amount of cold damage. So it just doesn't seem possible with a build that's doing physical to fire conversion with large ignites. I even grabbed all of the ignite nodes during my test. I grabbed these nodes down here. I grabbed faster ignite. I grabbed some ignite node, or sorry, these ones over here as well, damaging elements. And then I grabbed some more over here for ignite magnitude. And then I was going to also test this one, but it doesn't really increase the ignite. But I grabbed all of these things. And even with all of the ignite nodes on this side of the tree and this anoint up here, it still wasn't hitting 100%. And it was absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know how they want us to use Frostflame Nova. I think what you'll have to do is you'll have to get a lot of spell damage and cold damage. So what I'm probably going to do to test this in the future is I am going to play a shaman instead. And instead of doing fire spell on hit, we're going to do cast on ignite because that seems like it'll be a lot cleaner. We're not going to get it to proc as often off of cast on ignite because you have to be doing a lot of ignites to make that work. But it should still work. So we'll probably try to do some like more spell damage memes over here with rage. And I'll do like more of a cast on crit type build, except instead of on crit, it's gonna be like melee hit to proc ignite and then proc a freeze. Hopefully that will work. But with just attack damage alone, it seems like it's just not possible. Anyways, that's my biggest disappointment with Frostflame Nova right now is that it just does not seem to be doing what I thought it was gonna do. So instead, oh wait, also before we move on, I crafted this weapon specifically for this idea of doing huge ignites for Frostflame Nova. I This is the weirdest craft I've ever done, and it was actually pretty easy, but also kind of lucky. But I used the new Passion of Aldor rune, which transforms all cold and lightning modifiers into equivalent fire modifiers. So I grabbed an item off the market for like 2 or 4 divs. It had tier 2 cold damage, tier 2 lightning with an open prefix, and 2 suffixes. And what I did was I used this Passion of Aldor on it to transform those into fire damage. And we got like the most insane fire damage roll I've ever seen. So it's double tier 2 to fire. You cannot actually see this on Path of Building. So my Path of Building damage is actually slightly wrong because Path of Building does not calculate it that high. It's impossible. So let's say it's 248 to 352. On a weapon, the maximum roll that it can calculate is only. Oh, wait, actually, maybe they fixed it. Oh, they did fix it. Okay, never mind. Scratch that. It is correct. I looked at this yesterday or a couple days ago, and it was only showing like 100 to 200 fire. So it looks like they fixed it finally. Never mind. Good, good, good. That's good. They fixed it. Okay. But anyways, that roll is like extremely high, and you can only get that roll from doing the Passion of Elder. Unfortunately, that does take up 2 prefix slots. So what I was hoping to do was desecrate on with a jawbone, desecrate on physical damage. Instead, I got Fire Pen, which isn't terrible. It's kind of a low roll of fire damage, but now my hits have like 29% Fire Pen, which is insane. Yeah, 29%. It was at 36 because I had a jewel for Fire Pen as well. But like 30% Fire Pen. And then after that, I basically just slammed on another suffix and I got really lucky and it rolled +4 to all melee skills. And then I had 2 other suffixes. I had dexterity and I had like mana on hit or something. And I was hoping to hit the dexterity with a perfect essence, but I did perfect essence of haste to get onslaught on killing hits. and it took off the mana on hit and crafted on the onslaught. So unfortunately, I have a dead stat, which is the dexterity, but I kind of needed some dexterity anyway, so it's not that bad. So I've been using this for a while, and it did give me really huge ignites, and it was really fun. Unfortunately, I think just having better physical damage is better for this kind of build, though. So it might not be worth doing it, but I just did test out the ignite memes, and I mean it kind of works. It kind of works. Now, my armor is also kind of interesting here. I've basically the reason why I'm doing this setup is I have this armor and I have this weapon, this rune. I found this rune. It says attack, spend 5% of your maximum runic ward if possible to gain that much added physical damage. And I was like, my staff is missing physical damage right now. Why don't we try this? So I got the brass dome, and it can roll. It's like special modifier when you rune forge is that it can roll up to 1000 maximum runic ward, which is disgusting. So I basically just found one with -1 to all maximum elemental resistances because that's the lowest you can get on that. That we're not suffering from elemental res too badly. And then I just found one with at least 950 maximum runic ward. And I got this one. So 1600 runic ward, another 20% here, 40% here, and a little bit on my gloves and boots. And that means I'm sitting at 1700 ward. So whenever I hit with Whirling Assault or any attack, really, it is taking 5% of that and adding physical damage to it, which is like 85 added physical, which is quite a lot. If you look at like another like T1 weapon, I think that's more than a T1 flat fizz roll or something on a weapon, or it's close to or about the same. So like let's say this one for instance, this has a what is it? It's T1 flat fizz on it, right? That does 55 to 94 at max value. We're at 85, which is about in that range. So that's a lot of added physical damage. So if I guess if you need some added physical damage, you can always try to do this. And the best thing about Rolling Assault is that it snapshots the damage for the entirety of the spin. So whenever I attack something with this, it's only consuming 5% when I press it, right? It's not doing it each time it hits or each spin. It's just doing it for the first press, which makes it way more sustainable. And you can see the runic ward regen is extremely fast too. So I never really have to worry about that being drained just from attacking. Now, because we basically took off our body armor, all of our armor, and went full runic ward, that means that my armor is extremely low. I have under 1000 armor right now because we're only getting armor from our gloves and boots, meaning we should probably go full on into evasion rating, which I would also test probably since we have an evasion rating helmet that we're using. I might as well go full on evasion on my gloves and boots and then change all my armor nodes to evasion nodes. Probably get some evasion stuff over here. So keep that in mind if you do decide to try and do this. I don't recommend doing this, by the way. I just wanted to see what would happen. And the damage is pretty noticeable. It's pretty nice. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty nice. But I don't think it's worth doing unless you're going to go all out on it on Runic Ward, which means you'd probably have to get a new helmet and stuff too. Unfortunately, the one I got was corrupted, so I couldn't rune forge it and add more Runic Ward to it, but that's all right. Another thing to note that's different from the build that I posted is that I'm using Soft's Blood. This is mainly because it solves our resistance issues completely because of the Coal Stoker giving us 50% of our 50% value of our fire res to cold and lightning. So at 97 fire res, that's like 40, at least 45 to the other two resistances. So we just overcap extremely easily. And I also get a ton of life. So I'm sitting at like 2400 life, which is really nice. And then enemies in your presence have minus 25% fire res. You can see presence here. Now the presence is a little lower than our attack. You can increase this with certain things. I don't think it's super necessary though, because really we only want this on rares and bosses, so you just have to stand kind of closer to them than you normally would. And then as for rings, I just got Chaos Res because Chaos Res is extremely hard to come by. Got life, got physical damage with tasks, fire damage. I'm using them to solve my attributes with Dex and Int on this one. And then just get fire res if you can. And then I got leech physical as mana because that solves our mana issues kind of nicely. And then you could get leech life on the other ring or something if you wanted to. It's just kind of expensive. Make sure you get 30% movement speed, and then just fire res wherever you can get it on your gear. You don't have to invest into any cold or lightning if you just get a bunch of fire res, which is nice. Then as for the tree changes, uh, you'll notice I'm not going to the exact same nodes that I was before. I'm not taking these anymore because I already have a ton of fire damage on this new staff that I'm using. If you have a pure fizz staff, you might want to grab these. You could even grab these if you wanted to. I put this into POB, and this is really just increasing the area. It's not increasing our damage at all. So we already have tons of area from this node over here, giving us like 40% whenever we're igniting things. I took 2 points out of this just so I could invest into the maximum reses now that I have my 4th ascendancy, but I do plan on going back into these. I took iron reflexes because we only had 200 evasion. Just convert that to armor for like 2% increased armor, because why not? And then I went into honorless. I took out points from shock waves because that's just AoE on stun, and I went to honorless to get 50% increased melee damage against immobilize, which counts as heavy stunned, as well as some armor if you've hit an enemy with melee attack. So it's just free armor and free damage. This node is really, really strong. And then I also went for lasting trauma, mostly to test the ignite thing. I might actually unsock it out of this, unspec out of these. But it gave me, magnitude of ignite and stuff. So I'll probably end up unsocketing out of that and then going into this instead for 50. In fact, let's do it right now. Because like I don't need these anymore. I totally forgot to unspec out of those. Because now we have like 50% increased damage as well. So that's nice. We went from 10,000 to 12,000. So that alone is massive for the build. And that's about it for the Whirling Assault Smith and Kitava. I think I'm actually going to take a break from Whirling Assault for now because it's really not great for bossing. It could be. I'm gonna need a Giga staff for it though, and unfortunately, with the way the economy is right now, I cannot buy a staff unless I spend like 20 plus divines to get like a 800 DPS staff. It's insane. If you want to see what's going on with my next build, definitely subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with a new build update. And then if I end up coming back to this build, I will let you know how it goes. But yeah, great mapper, not great bosser because I just take too much damage and the defenses are not great. It's mostly my fault. I think if you don't do this thing and you just use a normal body armor, your defense is gonna be way better. You can probably get to like 3,000+ armor and then have like 40% of that applying to elemental hits. So don't do what I did. Stick to armor. Get a physical quarterstaff because we're converting to fire anyways. The ancestral cry and Frostflame Nova sucks. GG's.